This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. My guest in this edition of the program, Ambassador Ute Koenig. She's the German ambassador in Trinidad and Tobago. She attended the recently held CARICOM summit in Paramaribo, Suriname. My questions to her have to do with what did she make of it? What did she take away? How did that compare with regional integration movements in different parts of the world, including where she comes from in Europe? Ambassador, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning, Andy. Thank you for having me today in your show. I'm ready for your 10 questions.
Well, thank you very much. So let's start with that. So you went to this summit, and the obvious question is why you chose to go. What were you looking for?
I'm ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, but also to 9 other CARICOM members, and I'm also accredited to CARICOM and the OECS. So this was now the real first in-person conference since I came to these regions, because in the time of the pandemics, all the meetings had been done virtually. So when I received the invitation from the CARICOM Secretariat, my decision was imminent that I would go there, as had my predecessors done, because as a diplomat, even though we all made our experiences with Zoom and WebEx and Teams and other means, we all know that in diplomacy nothing can supplant real interactions between people from person to person. And sometimes you have to look each other in the eye and to discuss things also in the back of a room without everybody else hearing and listening to you to reach a consensus. And CARICOM is an organization where also all the decisions are based on consensus. So my feeling was that this summit would have a high impetus on the decisions that were to be taken. And of course, because I did not have a chance to travel to all the countries I'm accredited to, I was also hoping to touch base with some of the prime ministers and foreign ministers from the countries where I'm ambassador to.
Yeah, all right, pretty comprehensive. What was you make of it?
I thought it was a very well organized summit by the Surinamese government. And of course, I cannot compare it with other CARICOM summits. Just from reading and comparing the communiques, you had the impression that the decisions taken were quite substantial. And of course, I noted that the Prime Minister of TNT, Dr. Keith Rowley, said he found it one of the most efficient summits he attended to, and he's a veteran in attending these summits. I could see the interaction between the heads of government and the foreign ministers, and it really, well, it made clear to me that we are really like a big family. Everybody keeps telling me about this, about the Caribbean family and how you're brothers and all this. But to see it in action also gives you a different impression. The Secretary General of CARICOM, Dr. Carla Barnett, had made very clear that this was a summit that wanted to show some good for the people of the Caribbean and to steer away from bureaucracy and come more to implementation. And of course, you always say the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So some of the decisions on the pressing issues everybody is facing in the member states will still need for implementation. And there are groups, there are further meetings to discuss, especially the questions of agriculture and of the transport sector, interconnectivity, climate change. I know in TNT you'll have the Agri Forum this month, where decisions that were taken to reduce the burden of all Caribbean member states with their food bill. And this is a pressing issue for all politicians, because the rising inflation means that if you import 80 or 90% of all your food from outside, the price hike due to the war in Ukraine, to the follow-up of the pandemic, is felt by all the citizens. So for the citizens, it will be important that food security is tackled. It has been an issue already during the pandemic at several other meetings, but the focus was very high on this issue. And for the citizens, I think the decisions taken on the CSME, that you have more freedom of movement for other professions in the region, will be important, because people need jobs and need to have income to buy food.
Yeah, I think there was some further movement on that particular agenda item about the freedom of movement. They sort of expanding the categories of people who will enjoy that facility.
Yes, I think so far you had privileges for artists, for teachers, for medical staff, and now it will also be to other skilled workers. The definition was broadened so that now also like agricultural workers and domestic helpers would fall under this category and enhance the freedom of movement. And freedom of movement is one of the great steps of integrating in regional organizations. We made the same experience in Europe when we lowered our borders, and so this will really be important that people can feel it also for themselves.
Yeah, and I know you spent some time in Latin America before you came to Trinidad, and there are also these ambitions about sort of Latin American solidarity and collaboration as well. Is the CARICOM movement sort of in step with what the best practices in this regard, as how it plays out in different parts of the world?
Yeah. Well, integration always takes time, and the bigger grouping is, of course, sometimes the slower the steps might seem for the citizens. But you know, in Europe, we also took more than 70 years to reach the state where we are now. And also in SICA, the organization for integration in Central America is slow. And so I think it's a step-by-step process. And CARICOM has made quite an impact, and I think on the international scene, the small island states, they were really an important voice in the Paris climate talks, and they were raising the issue that's very much on everybody's mind currently, that's the climate change and the special vulnerabilities, especially the small islands are facing. And I know from colleagues who were dealing with Latin America and the Caribbean for a longer time, that also the regional groupings always made an impact in the United Nations General Assembly. You have a way of coordinating and trying to speak with one voice. And we all know that the sum is sometimes more important than the parts. So we did the same in Europe. We started small. First there were 6 countries who signed the Rome Treaties in 1957, and we expanded. We were 28, but then the Britons left us, so now currently we're 27 member states in the EU. And each change of membership and new things coming up, of course, changed the way the European member states are working together. And you had a revised Treaty of Chaguaranas, you had the introduction of the CSME, and my understanding from the discussions in Suriname was that there was some disappointment that the CSME was too slow, that it didn't move ahead, that there was a halt for some years. And I know that Trinidad, you also recently introduced legislation to push for it, but it's up to every member state sometimes to implement the decisions taken at summit. And this is something we know from Europe, but we know that, that as a grouping you move ahead, and the benefits for the citizens are very important, and if they are also felt by the citizens that they support the integration movement, that is important. So I think the focus of the Secretariat, that they say we must focus on the citizens, and the big issue on the summit was the focus on youth.
Yeah.
So that there'll be a youth summit in Paramaribo at the end of the year, and the president of Suriname was offering 10 hectares of land for youth camps, for getting together. And everybody was clear that 60% of the Caribbean are under 30. So even though you might have the impression that a lot of the participants in the summit are elderly, and everybody was remarking on the new young prime minister in Grenada.
Yeah.
But still, that the youth needs to be taken into account was clear, and they also had a representative from TNT. She was giving an impressive statement to all the heads of government to ask for more youth involvement. And these are similar discussions we also see in Europe, and we see them also especially with regard to the climate change issues, which are very prominent in youth demonstrations all over the world. I think that's the effect maybe of Greta Thunberg that's felt all over the world still.
Right. Yeah, and in fact, she is the dean of this core of CARICOM Youth Ambassadors, as they call them. So you don't doubt the sincerity of the leaders in wanting to deal with this issue as an issue of the moment. Young people's involvement and the future of young people who will inherit all of this.
No, I think that's a challenge for all the politicians, of course, but all politicians always know that they have to be re-elected, and the youth will also be the one who challenges whether they keep their promises, whether they really move ahead. And in recent elections, not just in Tobago and Grenada, but now also in Kitts and Nevis, you see that sometimes younger challenges with new ideas also have an attraction.
But I do want to go back to what you said as part of the response in the first instance. You see, you are accredited to 9 other countries in the region. That's almost the entire CARICOM. How do you split your time and energy to deal faithfully with this?
Well, my time here was marked by the pandemic, so due to the border closures and the breakdown of air flight connectivity, a lot of my things were done virtually with telephone calls, with the Zoom and WebEx meetings. So I even presented virtually to governor generals in certain countries. So now that the borders are open everywhere and we have more flights, of course I try to travel. When there is an occasion, you don't just go there for leisure. So you need to have a reason, like I had now for attending the CARICOM summit, and I had a meeting in St. Lucia, and I went to Barbados recently. But it was difficult. It was not the way I had expected this posting to be. But that was due to the pandemic. Worldwide, colleagues have faced new challenges due to the COVID-19 situation.
Yeah. You said what you noticed. Are you supporting it? You seem to be the question of decision-making by consensus. That is sort of the norm internationally?
No, it's and we are also having discussions in Europe. We want to move to more majority voting, but it's always a big decision because it means that you give up something of your sovereignty, and nobody likes to be in the minority if you take a decision by a vote. But this is a process, because normally consensus always means that decisions are slow, and of course sometimes critics say they are watered down, because in order to reach consensus you must sometimes lower your expectation on a certain threshold. In Germany we always have coalition governments where you must bridge between the party programs of different parties, so we are used to this process. But in other countries where you have like this first past the poll voting system, normally you always have a clear majority, and so the need for consensus if you're a one-party government isn't that big. So it's a question also of learning. But also in the European Union we are having more and more discussions to go for more qualified majority voting, and then we have built in thresholds that for a vote you need to have a certain amount of the population, not just the votes of each state counting, because also especially in Europe the population of each member state is quite different between Germany with 83 million people and Estonia, which is similar to Trinidad with 1.4 million. So you try to balance that. But we are also having the always discussion, same as you have in CARICOM, whether you always need all members of a grouping to move ahead, or whether you can have smaller units that are like pathfinders that go away as a core group, and others may join later when they are ready. And I know these are discussions you're also having in CARICOM. So next to the summit there were also some bi- and trilateral agreements and MOUs signed, and this is also a way of moving ahead.
Yeah, and then there are issues inside of that as to how we as individual member states deal with some issues such as Venezuela, such as China and elsewhere. But we'll probably get to that if time permits. But we take a break, we come back shortly.
set of bills here. I got phone bill, light bill, and a plane ticket. Where does ticket come from? Who flying here? And look, the roof leaking now.
It sounds like you need a loan from Eastern Credit Union during the Dobita promotion.
But who is you?
A lot of questions you're asking. You can get a loan for mortgage, home equity, debt consolidation, and a Georgie bundle. You know it's a Georgie bundle? Like everything in one. You can also get a chance to win up to $30,000 in prizes.
But there's my robe.
Focus, Daryl. He's sounding like you know what he's talking about. Eastern Credit Union have us covered. I done too.
And this promotion running until August 30th. You need to go down there right now.
But why you have my toothbrush?
You still asking another question. We will be here when you come back. Go down there, let me fix the roof. And they can probably get a new bed. Their bed doesn't making a lot of noise. So go down the road, Eastern Credit Union.
But how you know about my bed?
Don't beat up, Darrell. Hurry up, hurry up. Don't beat up. We will be here.
So, tell me more about this Dobita promotion.
Well,
knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
You're watching 10 Questions. My guest, Ambassador Ute Koenig, the German ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago and a range of other countries in CARICOM. The discussion around the fact that she attended the last CARICOM Heads of Government meeting in Paramaribo, Suriname. So let's take some of the issues you talked about, and you came away with a sense of how we're doing climate change, unemployment, youth involvement, food security, environmental protection. How do you grade these things as to, and how governments do that, and what you see, what you saw happening, what you were able to notice, how do you put priority on one as opposed to the other, or each of these things, you know, the determination or the ambition is to treat them with the same level of vigor and importance and urgency?
Well, as an observer to the summit, of course, I'm taking into mind also the German interest. We are a donor of development cooperation, and CARICOM is our partner in this, and we are having a special focus on climate issues on this. So that's obviously a subject that's closer to my heart as an ambassador when you sign agreements with CARICOM. But as an ambassador who also wants to travel in the region, I can feel the insecurity you are having on the connectivity side. And I could understand that for the government, for Antigua and Barbuda, the future of LIAD is highly important. And I noticed, of course, that in the working group they established, they also included Guyana, which is a good thing in my view, because Guyana, that's now the next big player in the region due to their resources and the richness. So everybody is looking to President Ali on this. And that, of course, certain issues are violent, are like violence in the region, are of interest. That's something you cannot ignore if you're living here and watching the news about murders and guns and everything every day. As an ambassador, of course, I also noted what you were saying on what was said on international relations, and I know that the Intersessional Summit in Belize in February, that was shortly after the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine started, they were very, very vocal in their condemnation, and all the member states in CARICOM were also helpful in the United Nations General Assembly voting there to condemn this. So these are issues you more of look at, but some of the implementation issues that will be very, very important for the benefits of the summit's decisions, they are probably different in every member state, how to implement these decisions about the reduction of non-tariff barriers. Yep. I'll leave that to the respective governments. I just noticed that you know that this is important to increase the market access for products, and also to get more involvement of the private sector, because they want to sell and to have exchange not just of persons but also of goods. And the industrial policy the Surinamese presidency was putting on the agenda will also be highly important. We are, as Germany, we are an export nation, and so we know how important it is to have market access, to have issues. As European nations, we have an agreement with the ACP countries, and the post-Cotonou agreement, the regulations have been prolonged because we are still in the final phases of signing this. But the need to work together on all these issues is clear to everybody.
So issues about, because decades ago, diplomats in this region used to talk sort of very ambitiously, would want having ambitions on this question of Cotonou, post-Cotonou. So that's still in play.
Yes. The discussions are led in Brussels, and I know that all the CARICOM member states in Brussels, their ambassadors, are very much focused on it. And you could also see it because you had the Secretary General of the OACPS, he was invited to the CARICOM summit, and he had discussions with the heads of government too. Yeah.
The issue of non-tariff barriers, that is something that features in intra-Euro relations as well, because that continues to be a bugbear. And we're talking about it now bilaterally between Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, for instance.
Yeah, no. Well, as an EU, we sort of have the EU and post-Cotonou regulation, so we don't do individual countries on that. But we hope, of course, that the post-Cotonou agreement will enter into force and that everybody will sign it in the future, and it will come to work for everybody.
So there are many similarities. There are more similarities than differences, you think, between when you compare regional integration movements one to the other, whether it's Europe, the Caribbean, Latin America?
There are similarities. There's of course different attitudes sometimes, but there are also, you have like in the ECCB is a common currency that is older than the euro. So the way you approach things and what kind of institutions you build up, of course, is different from, but you also have many regional institutions that are important to all the member states, and that's the same issue we have in Europe, where we also have a central bank. Of course, here you still have, the CDB, but CARICOM is a region where you're not just having one currency, but you see that for some of islands, they are joining forces together. So it's a path, and it's integration is a process. It's not something you say, okay, we do it, and the next day it's ready. It's small steps, and Germany has been a strong advocate of regional integration in Europe for many years. So we know that sometimes you take 2 steps ahead, and then you might also take a step back. We were very, very sad when our British friends left the European Union, but still we're working together and see where we can cooperate. So you have to adapt to new challenges.
Yeah, I don't know to what extent you know about this, but some years ago, the government in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the very Prime Minister who is there now, one of the longest serving ever in history, he had attempted to put something on the table for St. Vincent and the Grenadines to become a republic. One of the things with that is that they would have had to abandon the EC dollar and get the national currency, and the people said no, principally on that basis, that they wanted the Eastern Caribbean dollar to remain legal tender in St. Vincent. So,
well, democracy and every question you put to a vote by many people, always you have a mixed motivation. I knew about this referendum, but that was more because in recent months the questions of whether states want to become a republic and get rid of the Queen as their head of government was more in the focus. I knew that in St. Vincent in 2009 they had several questions put into the one referendum, and I think that's also why the Prime Minister was recently suggesting to put just a one question issue on the thing. But what motivates people sometimes to say, oh no, I won't accept this, it's difficult. It's something in Germany, we don't have these referendums, only in very, very limited cases. So I know that in Switzerland they put many questions to the votes, and sometimes it takes some time. I know that for the female vote to be introduced in all of Switzerland, it took longer than in other countries.
Yeah. All right. What would you say to ordinary people who have aspirations about the question of regional unity? But we're talking in the Caribbean, you know, a lot of people criticize decision makers, they criticize the politics and the politicians because, as you said earlier, sometimes you take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward because you want to get greater consensus among everybody and so on. Ordinary people don't understand that as to how you negotiate and the politics of communalism, if you want to call it. How do you tell people, well, that, you know, that is part of the process?
Well, I think it's important for all democratic governments, and the CARICOM region is a region where we share our democratic values as democracies. So for all politicians, it's clear that there must be a certain amount of accountability, of transparency on decision making. And in these new times where it's not just TV stations that can do 10 questions, but you can also communicate on lots of other social media, and you can create what in Germany we call it a shitstorm. I'm not sure if you call it the same. If somebody voices an opinion and then all the Twitter's users say, oh no, you're crazy, what are you doing? So there are new ways to communicate, and this also means that all the politicians and organizations must try also new ways of communicating to transmit their ideas and also report about progress they made, about setbacks they sometimes face. But the most important thing is really for people that they feel it. And when I was having a discussion with the former Secretary General of CARICOM, Mr. Larocque, I was encouraging him also to continue with these waiving of roaming fees for cell phone users, because this was a huge success story in Europe. When in Europe we did this was something everybody who was traveling within Europe could feel it. You get an SMS, but you don't pay more for your call to your loved ones when you're on holiday in Spain and you call back to Germany. And sometimes it's very small things that increase things. And of course, for a European, when we abandoned all the border controls, that was something that was huge in the time. And how huge this was only now felt by everybody in the pandemic, when young people were incredulous that the borders were closed, that you could not travel to another countries, that there were guards standing and wanting to see your passport and sometimes saying, no, you cannot go over to visit your boyfriend. And so the things we achieved and which we took for granted did receive a new value in the pandemic. And I think for politicians in all the CARICOM member states, also during the pandemic, they faced special challenges, but the way they were caring for their population and the decisions they took, they had to communicate them. We have seen here all the conferences by the Minister of Health and the chief medical officers explaining things and asking people to get vaccinated and to respect the rules. So you must maybe do more, but the success that you manage a crisis, that you manage a challenge, I hope that it will increase the trust of the citizens in their government. And in a democracy, if you don't gain that trust, you will lose the next election. So that's, of course, a challenge that normally motivates all politicians. not to make promises they feel they cannot keep.
Yeah. You've been a great guest, Ambassador Ute Koenig, the German ambassador in Trinidad and Tobago, and to a number of other countries in the Caribbean. This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.